Florida's Governor DeSantis has now signed the bill that allows discrimination in healthcare. Governor Ron DeSantis held a press conference this week in Destin. During the conference, the governor signed multiple pieces of legislation into law. One of the bills signed by the governor was Senate Bill 1580, which is what DeSantis is calling the Physicians' Freedom of Speech Law. The Human Rights Campaign, the HRC, has condemned Governor DeSantis for signing SB 1580 for calling it a license to discriminate in healthcare bill. This bill will allow healthcare providers and insurers to deny a patient's care based on religious, moral, and ethical beliefs. It creates a license to discriminate by allowing healthcare employers to discriminate in hiring, and it bars medical boards from disciplining doctors for spreading misinformation. In addition, SB 1580 was a whistleblower protection for healthcare providers and healthcare payors that take certain actions or disclose certain information relating to the reporting of certain violations. The governor also said SB 1580 prohibits boards or the Department of Health, if there is no board, from taking disciplinary action against or denying a license to an individual based solely on specified conduct, etc. Opponents of the law say this allows the denial of health care to transgender community, acting at the behest of the administration of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. The Florida Board of Medicine and the Board of Osteopathic Medicine also adopted this politically motivated bill. Arguably one of the most shocking anti-science moments that I can remember in my lifetime, because agree or disagree what you think about trans or don't think about trans or any other related issue, they all fall into place, but they fall into place after the significance of this bill. Because what this bill does is basically say, scientifically, we're going to reject the science, we're going to embrace the discrimination decision-making, and we're not going to give any state protection to those that reject science or are medically ignorant. That's what this bill does. Now, people will get involved in the nuances of the arguments of the bill, but broadly, this allows you to discriminate, to reject science, to have boards prevented from to discipline their members of their professional society and create whistleblowers. I hate the comparisons to 1939, but it was one of the tactics that the Nazi Party did. Be on the corner and report all of your neighbors in that building. Right. And that's how we'll get the Jews. We'll find out they're in that building, and that's how we'll get them out of the building. This is one of the most shocking anti-scientific, science-embracing things that I have seen in my lifetime, frankly.
Yeah. And I come back to the fact that they are always denying facts, denying science, denying every bit of information that's out there. I mean, imagine, somebody who's now afraid to go get medical care because a doctor may deny them, or they go for necessary emergency medical care and a doctor does deny them. It's a really scary place when you're talking, and politics is one thing, somebody's health, their life is different.
Access to healthcare is already so slippery in this country, so putting this kind of bill or law on the forefront of accessibility to medicine and being able to be treated for any illness is just, it blows my mind, truthfully, because like you said, it's the elimination of science. Like, we're just going based on now what I feel, and the one person that I think to turn to in a moment of truth is a scientist, is a doctor.
Right.
So to have a doctor tell you that, no, I'm going to deny you, medical care because of what XYZ reason, being queer, it's baffling. It's already difficult to navigate the system. So adding these laws would just make it even less accessible for people. And
now, I wasn't born in the 80s because I'm far too young, but for those who were, does this feel similar?
Shady read?
I think so.
I think that was a shady read.
Have a drag queen on the show, be ready.
All the rest of us old.
The AIDS crisis in the 80s, is there any feelings that relate to that? Because we're being denied because of who we are.
This law, to your question, would have been unthinkable in the 80s and 90s. It's impossible. This law was impossible in the 80s and 90s. And the reason is even the most radical of the most radical wouldn't suggest, wait, because you have an ethical belief, I'm not, get out of my hospital or get out of my clinic. It was just impossible.
That's like the exact opposite of what medicine should do, right? Like medicine should be
take it
do no harm.
They literally
Do no
take
harm.
a Hippocratic oath to
exactly.
protect and serve everyone medicinally, and this is like taking away that Hippocratic oath.
You know, one additional point. I understand that there's a lot of people that would applaud this, and they support the president or the governor's actions. Ooh, I'm getting too far ahead of myself. But at the end of the day, could you imagine? I continue to use insidious in terms of the decision making that we're watching. Very successfully, but insidious. Can you imagine the insidious nature if this thinking process became president of the United States?
Right.
In all seriousness, if you're willing to reject science to this level based on the whim of, I have an ethical feeling that today the wind is blowing to the west versus the right, so therefore I'm going to deny your medical care. And that is protected with whistleblowers and boards from preventing any kind of admonition of the doctor, et cetera, and so on. And that becomes the president of the United States thinking. We're going to take a turn in America unlike we've ever seen before.
I mean, I think the business case here is that we as constituents and people who have healthcare and benefits need to lean into our medical providers and start saying things like, if you're going to a doctor and, Aetna or United Healthcare is covering covering this doctor, and this doctor isn't actually giving the medical care that the medical profession is putting out there, then they should no longer be an approved doctor for plans. And we need to get the business community, which is what's happening in North Carolina, which is happening, in many states across the country, is we need the business community to come in and say, this isn't going to be good for our employees, for our students, for our residents, for whoever is our constituency in the state. And that's what we need to fight back on this.
We are Queer News Tonight, the world's first and only live daily LGBTQ+ evening news show from Happening Out Television Network. In the model of PBS and NPR, we educate, inform, and entertain by supporting the 10 pillars of the LGBTQ+ community, with more than 100,000 a week watching on Roku, Apple Television, and other channels. To keep the stories going, we accept donations with 100% transparency. Stay updated and live authentically with Queer News Tonight.